2 years ago, I was told by Gibson's publicist, that he wants to meet with me and have an understanding. I'm still waiting. There is no course. There is no curriculum. We need in-depth conversation. It's a therapy. And the most important step in any therapy is to admit that you have a problem, which is a step Gibson has already taken. End of quote. Now, you will say, why lose our precious time on such a vulgar incident? Nonetheless, for an observer of today's ideological trends, this event displays, I think, almost a nightmarish dimension. The mutually reinforcing hypocrisy of the two sides, the anti-Semitic Christian fundamentalists and the aggressive Zionists, is breathtaking. Politically, the reconciliation between Gibson and Foxman signals an obscene pact between anti-Semitic Christian fundamentalists and aggressive Zionists, a pact whose expression is the growing support of the fundamentalists for the state of Israel. Recall, recent Pat Robertson claimed that Sharon's, Israel ex-prime minister's, heart attack was the divine punishment for the evacuation of Gaza. What really worries me here is that Jews will pay dearly for such pacts with the devil. Can one only imagine what a boost to anti-Semitism Foxman's offer will give? Can you imagine a reaction of an ordinary guy? My God, Jews are now really totally into control. You make a little bit fun of the Jews and you are forced into treatment, psychiatric treatment, and so on. Now let me analyze this a little bit more close. What underlies this reconciliation is obviously an obscene quid pro quo. Foxman's reaction to Gibson's outburst was, I think, precisely, it was not too severe, too demanding. It was on the contrary, that he let Gibson all too easy off the hooks. Namely, he accepted Gibson's refusal to take full personal responsibility for his anti-Semitic remarks. They were really not his own, it was pathology, some unknown force took over under the influence of alcohol, and so on. However, the answer to Gibson's question, my God, where those vicious words came from, is ridiculously simple. They were simply part of his ideological identity, formed, as far as one can say, in large extent by his father, a virulently anti-Semitic Australian Catholic fundamentalist. So, what underlies Gibson's remarks is not madness, but simply a well-known ideology, anti-Semitism. Consequently, what Gibson needs is not therapy, it's not the admission that he has a problem, but the acceptance of his responsibility for his remarks. Concretely, what he has to do is to ask himself in what way his outbursts are linked to his version of Catholicism, in what way they function as its obscene underside. In other words, Gibson's hypocrisy is simply a small-scale replica of the hypocritical reaction of the Catholic Church to pedophilia flourishing in its ranks. When the church representatives insist that these cases of pedophilia, deplorable as they are church's internal problem, when they display great reluctance to collaborate with police in their investigation, they are, I claim, in a way right. The pedophilia of Catholic priests is not something that concerns simply the persons who, because of accidental reasons of private history, with no relation whatsoever to the church as an institution, happen to choose the profession of a priest. It is, this pedophilia, a phenomenon which, I claim, concerns the Catholic Church as such. It is inscribed into its very functioning as a socio-symbolic institution. It does not concern the private unconscious of individuals. It concerns the unconscious of the institution itself. It is not, I'm not talking now in a Jungian way about any collective unconscious, but the set of unwritten obscene rules which supplement the explicit rules of an institution. Along these lines, to make it clear, one can imagine a straight, not pedophiliac priest who, after years of service, gets involved in pedophilia because the very logic of the institution seduces him into it. According to some investigations by my friends in Slovenia, this effectively was the case. They claimed that they looked into the past of some priests, and again, it's not, unfortunately, they were privately pedophiliac. They were nice heterosexual guys, nothing to do with children's sex, that any Catholic preacher would love them, and it's the institution, literally, which redirected their interests. Such an institutional unconscious designates the obscene disavowed underside, which, precisely as disavowed, sustains the public institution. In the army, this underside consists of the obscene sexualized rituals of fragging and so on, which sustain the group solidarity. What this means is that identifying oneself with this secret side is a key constituent of the very identity of a Christian priest. If a priest seriously, not just rhetorically, denounces these scandals, he thereby excludes himself from the ecclesiastic community. He is no longer one of us, in exactly the same way as, for example, a citizen of a small town in the south of the United States in the late 20s, if he denounced Ku Klux Klan to the police, excluded himself from his community, betraying its fundamental solidarity. So, back to Foxman. When Foxman offered to treat Gibson's outburst as a case of individual pathology, which needs a therapeutic approach, he not only committed the same error as those who want to reduce cases of pedophilia to individual pathologies. Much worse, he contributed to the revival of the Serbsky Institute way of dealing with problematic political, ideological attitudes as phenomena which call for psychiatric intervention. In the same way that the overriding belief of the Serbsky Institute was that a person has to be insane to be against communism, Foxman's offer implies that a person has to be insane to be anti-Semitic. Now, I'm not saying against this that it's healthy to be anti-Semitic. What I'm saying is that this way to dealing with the problem enables us to avoid the key issue, which is that precisely anti-Semitism in our Western societies was and is not an ideology displayed by insane people, but an ingredient of spontaneous ideological attitudes of perfectly sane people, of our ideological sanity itself. This then is where we stand today. A sad choice between Gibson and Foxman, between the obscene bigotry of fundamentalist beliefs and the no less obscene disqualification of problematic beliefs as cases of insanity that need therapy. Now let me go even darker in the newly emerging ideological obscenity. The ultimate irony is that, now I pass to a more theoretical general claim, what is threatened by such disqualifications, where if you have unacceptable ideological political views, you are considered as the one who needs therapy, I claim is nothing less than, what is threatened is nothing less than the notion of another human being as neighbor. Neighbor in its full meaning in Jewish and also Christian legacy. The other, who is to be treated psychiatrically for his opinions, is deprived of the dignity of a neighbor. Now, traces of this denigration of the neighbor are also found elsewhere. Say, recently I read, with horror I must admit, Sam Harris' bestseller, End of Belief. It's a book arguing in a vulgar materialistic way about how beliefs today sustain terror, that we need to break finally with religion. But it's a little bit terrifying to read in this book Harris' approach to torture.